Nobody won.
Nobody.
But the mere fact that we are all represented, and we all represent thousands of people, having 1 seat or 2 seats is not a small matter.
It was taken to a very literal degree in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Right, where there was no effort made to even reach the lowest bar in terms of the spirit of the agreement.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
We actually have very high levels of accountability now that are in place because we are a minority government. So
Yeah,
what
but
that
you've
means,
got 97% of the money is managed by
but
the
what
ANC.
I'm saying is that in the legislature itself, we as the parties that make up the executive are a minority.
Join us in supporting the Springboks when they take on the All Blacks at Ellis Park on the 31st of August 2024. We will be hosting exclusive hospitality at the Ellis Park Arena. Our hospitality includes pre-match analysis by international rugby players, lunch, drinks, Category A tickets inside the stadium so that you can enjoy the game right there. After the match, we're going to have live music, more food, more drinks, exclusive parking. What more could you want? If you want to join us and bring any size group, get more information below this video. Welcome to the State of the Nation, driven forward by Pace Car Rental. Go and hire a car, get a discount, go online, use our code SONA, and you'll get a discount on your next hire car. And while I'm selling, I think you should like and subscribe the State of the Nation so we can continue growing. I think we're the fastest growing podcast in this space. So because we keep on bringing great content and great guests, and joining us today is the national chairperson of Rise Mzansi, been here before, and that's Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. Vuyiswa, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Than's Mike. It's good to be back in the
hot seat. Yeah, for somebody that wears somebody with a lot of hair, you wear 2 hats now, because you're national chairperson of Rise Mzansi, and you're also the newly minted Minister of Agriculture in Gauteng.
MEC.
MEC.
Yeah, we don't want to upset the Minister of Agriculture.
MEC of Agriculture for Gauteng.
That's correct.
Before we get to Gauteng, let's talk about the elections. Rise Mzansi was the pre-election story, many column inches.
Oh, sorry. Naughty. Oh.
Okay.
Yo.
Yeah. So carry on.
What was that?
Right. Before we get on to the Gauteng legislature, let's first talk about the elections. Rise Mzansi were one of the pre-election stories, lots of column inches, lots of mileage, lots of things. And then you had the kiss of death. You had Peter Bruce saying, vote for Rise Mzansi. And he has been a serial a destroyer of political parties. I remember him telling the world to vote for Bantu Alamisa, telling the world to vote for Cope, telling the world to vote for Cyril Ramaphosa, and then he told the world to vote for Rise Mzansi. Were you happy with the outcome of the elections from a Rise Mzansi performance perspective?
So, I think, Sham, in Peter's defense, I actually read the article, and he categorically did not tell people to vote for Rise Mzansi for that particular reason. But yeah, I think it was this election shocked a lot of people, and I'm sure you've done extensive analysis on the election. We got to witness. We were really in a very a changing. South Africa was undergoing a lot of change at one time. We saw the effect of MK. We saw, obviously, the transition into now coalition governance and multi-party governance. And there was a lot of uncertainty. And then out from seemingly nowhere, the new kids on the block who have no, superstar politician, no track record.
Well, they do have one superstar politician, but anyway, yeah.
What I'm saying is we had no brand names behind
Yes.
us, and had never actually previously contested. And I think we did well in a very tough election environment. I mean, most established parties lost a lot of ground, notwithstanding the governing party, which lost, 17%, the biggest loss they've had in any single election cycle. Even those that grew, if I look at the Democratic Alliance, a 1% growth is hardly anything to write home about. And then there were many others that just didn't make it back into parliament. So I think under the circumstances, we did exceptionally well. We have 2 seats in the National Assembly. We got a seat in the Gauteng provincial legislature, and now we're in the executive. I have not seen such performance. Of course, there was the likes of Cope back in the day. But I think under the circumstances, we have performed well, and we've got a good foundation on which to grow.
So you're much covered, and boy, it got a lot of coverage. Your funders, you feel that they got bang for their buck, did they?
Absolutely. I mean, had we not been represented, had we not made it into parliament, I think that would have been a problem. But not only have we made it, but we have actually been able to be a voice in the room. We are part of the Government of National Unity. We're able to contribute and actually drive the policy agendas that we had put forward. As I said, we also now have this executive role in the Gauteng government, and it enables us to actually start putting into action some of the things that we spoke about during the election campaign. So I think not only the funders, but also the voters can be proud that we have chosen not to sit on the sidelines. We've chosen not to be bystanders or commentators. We have chosen to take the fight into the room and to ensure that over the next 5 years, we actually deliver some tangible impact for those who've supported us.
Yeah. Now, I've made the point in a lot of the analysis, and boy, we've analyzed
analysis paralysis.
But look, I enjoy this stuff, and I think it's valuable, and I think the country needs it. But I've made the point that it looks to me like Rise Mzansi, along with the others, may have been hurt by the fact that nobody can have a sentence that doesn't say Rise Mzansi, Build One South Africa, and Action SA, as if it's, a triple-barreled name. That seems to have been a bit of a blurring factor.
Well, I can't say I've had the same experience.
Don't you read? Of course you do.
No,
but,
of course
but you
do.
But you do have that comment a lot.
I do think there is a desire to see a consolidation of the pragmatic centrists, and that's how I'll define the parties that you speak of. There is a desire to see unity and to see parties collaborating together, especially parties that are potentially ideologically similar. And we have, and I think that's the spirit in which we have chosen to be part of the GNU. But again, a month, a week is a long time in politics. There's nothing that says those discussions may not happen one day in the future, where we might, find forms of collaboration with the parties you've mentioned. I think that's really what people want to see. They want to see parties working together. They want to see like-minded parties collaborating.
But now there's got to be some differentiation, because you said ideologically similar. But there's a gulf between, for example, what you stand for and what, for example, Action SA stands for.
Of course, yeah. And which is why we're not one party to begin with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I made this point to you in our previous interview. I've made it to Songezo Zibi when he was here, and that is that your policies appear a carbon copy of the ANC's policies.
Yeah. So carbon copy, I wouldn't say, but I would say...
Cut and paste?
I would say that we certainly probably occupy a similar political space. As I said, sort of centrist, broad church politics. One might even say center-left. I think that's probably where we are located. But really, as I've also said to you previously, we believe that is the heart and center of South Africa as a whole. There will always be extremists on all ends of the political spectrum, but the heart and soul of South Africa is social democratic. We believe so. If you read our constitution, if you engage with the values that we espouse as a country, be it the values of Ubuntu, the values of solidarity, equality, justice. Those are fundamental values of social democracy. And so the ANC, obviously being the founding party, of our democracy, has had the opportunity to cultivate that and shape that. And I think we want to see that. But that needs to be
just under better management.
Well, there has to be better management, but I also think there's an opportunity to have more innovative thinking around policy. I think a lot of the ideas that may have informed policy 30 years ago need to be reviewed, need to be rethought. We have a very young population, for example, that, were not even there in 1994 when this democracy was born and when the political compromises that were made. So I think it's hard to imagine, or let me say, it's very difficult for this idea, for parties to self-correct. And I think the time is now for something like Rise Mzansi to be born, to be able to take that vision of South Africa forward.
Yeah. And which leads you, I presume, into almost pre-election, you guys weren't part of the multi-party charter. There was a lot of talk about that being a fit.
Will you admit now that I was right?
I will admit that it wasn't a fit.
Okay.
Right. Right. So, but what seems to be quite a comfortable fit is into the government of national unity.
Yeah, look, comfortable is a strong word. I would say that it is the best of a difficult circumstance. And as I said, we are in the era of multi-party governance, which requires a different approach to governance. And I think it's always interesting when people say so-and-so won or didn't win. Nobody won.
Nobody.
But the mere fact that we are all represented, and we all represent thousands of people, having 1 seat or 2 seats is not a small matter. It means, 70, 80,000 people woke up and voted for you because they wanted you to do something. And so it's really about being at the table and being able to advocate and be a voice for all of the people that put you there.
Yeah. So obviously to get to the point of the government of national unity has been a struggle.
Yeah.
What did you think of the process that finally got to a cabinet announcement recently?
I think it is actually highly commendable that it went as smoothly as it did, given that it is our first rodeo in this type of scenario. I mean, I'm not here to sing their praises, but I think if we look at, many of the other countries on the continent and how they manage these types of transitions, I think we have a lot to be proud of as a country. And the fact that we had a peaceful transition, we have transitioned into this new era, and the former governing party was able to say, we are willing to accept, the fact that we didn't get a majority and to be a convener of other parties to be able to form a government. And the 2-week timeline is
crazy.
Is impossible. Countries that are far more developed than ours, that have far more experience in coalition governments, have not been able to achieve such. Many of them have gone a year, sometimes 2 years without forming a government. So I think the fact that it was achieved in 2 weeks, the fact that we're able to bring parties with actually vastly different ideological leanings around a table to come to a certain kind of compromise that would enable a government to be formed, I think is highly commendable.
Okay, so commendable, compared to what, I suppose, is the question, because commendable compared to anarchy, I'm sort of saying you can't overly
compared to it could have been worse. That's what I'm saying. It could have been a lot worse.
That's a South African position.
It could have been
a lot worse.
But Mike, it could have been a lot worse. We could have not formed a government in 2 weeks. We could have been in and out of the Concord. We could have still been debating election fraud. We could have been in a state of limbo for the next 12 months. And I know I'm an optimist generally, but I think I'm not giving anyone a free pass. This is not just the ANC's success. It's actually a nod to every single party that was willing to...
I think you've got to give credit. This is a massive success for the ANC.
It's a massive success for the ANC, but I'm saying for the DA, for the IFP, for all of the parties that were able to come together and say we're willing to put our individual differences aside for a moment for the purposes of a common objective, I think is commendable.
So now, in order to achieve those crazy deadlines, which to everybody that doesn't know this issue as well as perhaps you and I, because we've been covering this extensively and it's now what you do, it's quite clear that the people that wrote the Constitution didn't really have this in mind. They had in mind a party getting a majority.
Absolutely.
And it's set up that way. Coalitions, as we've seen, and take some time to negotiate. South Africa has got some flaws in the system, which makes coalitions particularly difficult to enter into. And one could say that the way that we finally got to where we got to is built on a good old other South African favorite, and that is deceit.
Oh.
Right? And that is that an agreement struck to get to those deadlines, because the big deadline was the appointment of the president, the appointment of the speaker.
Yes.
So an agreement is entered into to get to that, largely between the ANC and the DA. And then the ANC chooses not to honor that agreement. What do you think of that?
I think, Mike, that negotiation is an art.
And an agreement?
No, I'll say negotiation is an art. And it requires, yes, a level of good faith, and parties who, on both sides, can negotiate in good faith and, well, one, in good faith, but also ultimately get the best that they can get out of the deal. And I think everybody entered into this negotiation wanting to get the best out of the deal. And I don't think anybody went in there saying, oh, I'm just trying to make a great day for the next guy. Everybody went to get the best that they could get. And I think ultimately we got a government that is representative and where all parties, have walked out with something that they wanted to achieve.
And proportionality, do you think that should play a role in a government of national unity? Or do you think it's just sort of, he has an agreement, turns out the president's got a lot of power, therefore he can do whatever he likes? Because in essence, the ANC, having not won the election, walk away with just about as many cabinet seats as they had before. They just bloated the hell out of the cabinet, right? Shortchanged specifically the DA in terms of their share of the vote, and sort of said, well, it was them because they wanted to stick to an agreement that we didn't think was an agreement.
Look, I can't comment on whether...
But I mean, it might be your turn next election is
sure,
what I'm saying.
Sure, and that's what I'm saying, and I started by saying negotiation is an art.
But I'm saying negotiation happens before an agreement, right? You sign an agreement, then it's an agreement.
It's also very important when drafting agreements to make sure that they truly reflect what it is that you want, because there's a spirit of proportionality, and then there is saying that we'll actually have one-to-one proportionality, which is not what that agreement said. It said, to the best of our ability, we will ensure proportionality. Now, you will obviously appreciate that there are parties, even within the GNU, that have one seat, but were given cabinet posts. Technically speaking, maybe if it was literal proportionality, they wouldn't have gotten anything. They don't get that.
As Rise didn't get.
Correct. But the spirit of the agreement was, let us try and have as many parties represented in this government as possible, and endeavor to have a form of proportionality. So
do you think by negotiating or by implementing the way it's been implemented, which looks from my standpoint as really bad faith, do you think this is a good launching point for the government of national unity, or do you think, it's all over? It'll.
Look, I mean, I think it was a bit of a rocky road to get to the final agreement, but I'd like to believe that.
How would you have handled it if you were on the receiving end? Let's just say Rise Mzansi got 10% of the vote. You go into a government of national unity with a party that got 40%. Therefore, they get 4 seats. You're meant to get one.
Well, I mean, I probably
and they get 8, and you get
I
half.
probably would have read the agreement properly and ensured that it represented what I actually wanted, and then not agreed to it if it didn't. So I think that's the starting point. But in saying that, I think that there were many other clauses in that agreement that have been met. And as I'm saying, I think the end goal is, let's form a government that is broadly representative. And let's, of course, try and engage with each other in good faith. It was a bit of a rocky road to get there. But ultimately, now that the government has been formed, I think it should be water under the bridge. And I'm hoping that we will be able to move forward from this moment and govern together,
Okay, so obviously understanding that, I explained it, that it's a little bit like I give you money to get the car and then you drive off with the car, right? That's really what happened. But you've got the money and you've got the car. And
school fees, Mike, that's what it's called.
Yeah, but the stakes are quite high. This isn't the
No,
schoolyard,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Taking that further, it was taken to a very literal degree in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Right, where there was no effort made to even reach the lowest bar in terms of the spirit of the agreement.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Look, again, in reading the GNU agreement, it was not explicitly stipulated that it is binding upon provinces. I think that's number one. And that's a very important factor. Although there may have been a desire to replicate what had happened at national, it's obviously not possible because provincial dynamics are different. So be it KZN, be it Gauteng.
But KZN, the agreement was stuck to.
No, but not to the letter, is what I'm saying. So even
where wasn't it stuck to in KZN?
I'm saying you don't have direct proportionality in KZN.
Right.
Yeah. So as I'm saying, there's an agreement that you can achieve, and you need to be able to say, okay, those of us who are part of this agreement or part of this government, what works for us? Can we reach an agreement? And as I said, if you look at the GNU agreement, it wasn't necessarily binding on provinces. So it is unfortunate again.
Okay, so you made the point, sorry, that the agreement should have been written better, but there was a short window to.
Of course, yeah.
Once again, and I'm asking this because you would, in a different time, as the chairperson, you could have been the person negotiating that agreement. If you're now unhappy with the agreement, because you now need it to be a 65-page agreement rather than a couple of pages, but there's a time limit. Do you not take that leap of good faith, or do you just say, no, I'm just not going to sign this, and we're going to miss the deadline, we're going to have a constitutional deadlock?
I think whatever decision I would take accountability for that decision and not try and make it everybody else's fault.
You can't take accountability for the actions of others.
No, I'm saying if I sign something off and I make a decision that I'm going to make this decision in the best interests of time or in the best interests of, or I'm going to take a risk or whatever, that is a decision that I make. If I make a decision that I'm not going to deadlock government, that's a decision that I make. If I make a decision, I must own the decision.
Okay.
And I must take accountability for the decision. And we've all been in negotiations where we haven't necessarily gotten what we wanted. But I'm saying the point is, ultimately, did we get what we want? Yes, we got a government of national unity. Did we get direct literal proportionality? No, we didn't. But I think we actually got better than direct literal proportionality because we got more players in the room. We got more parties in the room, and we have now an ability to actually have a more stable government because you have more people at the table who can, participate in the work of policy making, etc.
So let's talk about politics Gauteng style. Prior to the election, I called it the Lesufication of politics. That's when you just go and employ, a whole militia. You give jobs to a whole lot of people. You don't pay charities and people that are helping the desperately desperate in Gauteng. You use that to kind of buy votes. And then you go and do a deal that is completely contrary to the national agreement. And as you say, the politics in the province look different. Now, along comes that, and Premier Panyaza Lesufi says, well, to hell with the DA who want their share and have already voted him in. So sorry, I've got your money and your car.
Yeah.
I'll get from other parties, get people to step in and give them, I think the technical term is bullshit posts within the, sorry, no disrespect, within the Gauteng
for the record, I think that's not disrespectful to me, but actually to the agricultural community, not just in Gauteng. I think agriculture is a critical
sector
part of our economy. And actually a very critical pillar of
And
our society. So
100%.
it's
And
not to me, but I think to the sector.
no, I think the sector, and I'll happily answer to any criticism I get out of this, but to be MEC for agriculture in Gauteng, that sounds almost like a Monty Python sort of position, right? This is hardly the farmland of South Africa, right? The massively urban area with a few plots, right? And I do understand, because I've actually done some work in the sector, but this is hardly the farming heartland of South Africa, the smallest province by some distance, by some measure. We do have a few farms. There is some farming that's done in Gauteng, I promise you. It's considerably less than the rest of the other provinces, but it is what it is. And then what does our Premier do? He gives 3 seats to other parties. He gives you the agriculture seat. He splits off finance to give e-commerce.
E-government.
E-government, even worse than e-commerce, to the guy from the IFP. And Patriotic Alliance, he gives environmental, right, to an urban province. So quite clearly he's not serious about coalition government, right, where he's given, then he takes all the possessions for his own party and himself. You happy to serve in such an arrangement?
Well, I think as a starting point, I do think it's unfortunate that the DA and the ANC were unable to find each other. And it would have been a better outcome had, they been able to find each other. But in saying that, what we now have in Gauteng is actually a minority government. So as much as the executive is made up of different parties, we actually have very high levels of accountability now that are in place because we are a minority government. So
but you've got 97% of the money is managed by the ANC.
What I'm saying is that in the legislature itself, we as the parties that make up the executive are a minority. So at any point, I actually think that the people of Gauteng are in a very favorable position because we now have a situation where those who are outside of the executive are actually in the majority and have the ability to ask the questions, to drive the direction, and hold this government actually to account to what it's set out to do.
Now, Vuyiswa,
and then coming back to your earlier question in saying the portfolios and how they've been split, it's not mine to comment on that. I wasn't in the room when that decision was made. It's the Premier's choice how he splits his roles. However, from our perspective as Rise Mzansi, we definitely don't see this portfolio as a non-entity or a ceremonial portfolio. Gauteng has the biggest population in our country. We eat the most and we work, we need jobs and we need industry to be based in Gauteng. We have two of the two biggest fresh produce markets are located in Gauteng. And the bulk of food that is traded in South Africa is traded here. Not just within South Africa, but also exporting out to other parts of the world. Is
that now a function of your portfolio or is that a commerce
It's both.
portfolio?
It's both. It's actually both. So part of the mandate of this portfolio is to ensure that we have a healthy, functioning agricultural sector. And that's not just about farming. And I think that's the misconception. But coming to the other misconception is that just because because it's a small province, it doesn't mean there's no opportunity. There's actually a lot of agricultural activity. Areas like Brits, areas like Tarleton. We have, in fact, I think one of the top lettuce producers in the country based in Gauteng. We have the seed companies and all the big agricultural organizations head officed in Gauteng. So policy around agriculture is being developed right here. And you ask yourself, why are they here? Because it is the epicenter of where this, it's the pulse actually of where this country operates from. So I think we need to expand our thinking around what, one, agriculture is, but two, around the opportunities and the multiplier of opportunities that are available. And it requires, not to toot my own horn, but a leader that can actually think a bit laterally and, bring my experience. I've been an entrepreneur, I've built businesses. And I think this for me is an amazing opportunity to change perceptions around the agricultural economy in Gauteng and to use it as a base to achieve many of the things that we want to achieve, be it job creation, ending hunger, dealing with poverty issues, urban sprawl issues. We have so many people that live on the outskirts, peripheries of our province who have no access to economic opportunities. How do you deal with them? You have to create localized economies, and agriculture is an amazing way to do that, be it through community gardens, small-scale farming, etc., etc. And lastly, I think also just the technology that is possible. We have one of the most high-skilled and high-tech agricultural sectors on the continent. So the ability to also train up young people in those skills and export those skills to other parts of the world is massive. But again, I think that's what we aim to bring. Looking at this portfolio with a different lens, and not just making it about politics, but really about delivering outcomes for both the people of Gauteng and the country as a whole.
Okay, so you mentioned that the residents of Gauteng, of which both you and I are long-suffering residents of Gauteng, and a big reason for our suffering has been the fact that we haven't had stable governance in our cities.
Sure.
Because we haven't had coalitions that would hold.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to play out. You said that actually this might be a better outcome because we've got a minority government that's going to be held responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is what we need right now? A Gauteng government that literally is sitting there at the mercy of other parties that they have either chosen not to deal with or chosen to exclude?
I think that as the citizens, and I myself am also a voting citizen. Before I'm a politician, I'm a citizen. I think that we get the government that we vote for and that we choose. And what I mean by that
we don't.
No, what I mean by that is every single party that is elected by people who choose them to be there. And similarly, over the next 5 years, it is very important that the people who have elected these representatives observe their behavior and ensure that they are doing the best for this province. And what I mean by that is that we've got a local election coming up in 2026. So it's very important for us to also watch how the parties that we've elected behave. If they are going to be bringing malicious votes of no confidence every 2 weeks, that should tell us something about those parties, and we must then be able to demonstrate that they don't represent our views come 2026. And those parties that are in the executive, such as ourselves, who are saying we've got a role, we want to use that to, amplify our promises or the work that we've done, I'm hoping that voters will see that and will then be able to give us a bigger opportunity and a bigger platform. So what I'm saying is that we are in, it is a difficult scenario, Mike. I'm not making light of the situation. I think every party that registers at the IEC and chooses to contest an election would love to get 51% plus. We all set out to do that. We did not get that because the voters did not give any party a majority. And so we as the representatives, it's now our chance to demonstrate value to people who voted, to say this is what you voted for. And I actually I'm hoping that as the citizens, we also see this as an opportunity to actually be more vigilant, to hold public representatives accountable, to follow proceedings in Parliament, in the legislature, to actually concern ourselves with how people vote on issues, on the issues that matter most to us. That is what being an active citizen is about. And we also now have to sit up and become more active as citizens. Yeah.
Now, you made the point, that people will be watching. One of the legitimately big questions asked about going into governments of national unity or in provincial governments that are alliances or coalitions or whatever you would call them, is that suddenly we'll get soft on the issues. Will our Minister of Agriculture, not you, the Minister, raise the issue of Phala Phala in cabinet,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Because should they now, as Minister Nchiveni indicated, the other parties must now follow the ANC line because this is an ANC-led government. Now, in other words, should we bury all the corruption? Should we be happy that Zizi Kodwe is sitting in Parliament? What's your view on that? Do you think people that are in these alliances now be soft on stuff that South Africans care about, corruption, etc.?
Absolutely not, Mike. I think
stuff that's been swept under the carpet.
Absolutely not. I think that we should always be driven by our principles and be driven by values, and actually just obviously be driven by the law. Where there is unlawful behavior, or where there's a suspected unlawful behavior, it is the role of parties, particularly those who are in the legislatures or who have the role of holding executives accountable, to raise those issues. And I would hope that parties cannot be bought and their values are not bought by simply being given positions. And I want to categorically state that is our view as Rise Mzansi. The mere fact that I happen to be part of the executive in Gauteng does not stop any leader of Rise Mzansi from raising issues that are of relevance or important to the residents of Gauteng, whether I'm part of the government or not.
So will you be raising the issue, for example, of the Tembisa Hospital, which has seemed to have been swept under the carpet,
yes,
or the fogging of schools when people couldn't go to school?
I may not be the individual who raises the issues, because my role now is in the executive. Remember, we have different...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You said that people mustn't be silent, whether they're in the executive or not.
I'm saying the party. Remember, I'm not just a single individual.
Yeah.
We have hundreds of individuals,
yes,
and many leaders within the party. We have different structures as well. So my point is that if we have, just today actually, our national leader, Songezo Zibi, was appointed to be part of the SCOPA committee at a national level, and we have Makashule Kano, who's also a member of a number of other committees within Parliament. They will be raising the issues that are relevant.
So,
unfortunately, we don't have representation in the legislature, but we have other ways within the party. We've got a spokesperson, we've got other individuals that can raise issues. My mandate now as an MEC is to take an executive role and build a track record in governance and execute on some of the programs that we as Rise Mzansi have been advocating for. That's my role.
Will you be raising issues in the Gauteng legislature about some of these issues which have been swept under the carpet? I mean, a woman paid for it with her life.
If there are issues within my department that I am mandated to lead, of course I will raise those issues. But I'm saying, Mike, the government has different tiers and spheres for a reason. For example, if I'm sitting in the legislature, you have a different mandate from when you are sitting in the executive. All people, all it's not just a Rise Mzansi thing. All, and similarly, when you're at a national level, provincial, local, you have different mandates. So my point is, we have transitioned now from simply being in a political campaign. We are now holding different, very specific, wearing different hats at different levels of government. And so as a party, we have had those discussions about what roles do people need to play so that we can deliver on a multitude of things that we've set out to do. It's not just about being in the opposition benches. We have those who are going to do that work. And myself, I'm in the executive. My role is to ensure that this department delivers outcomes according to the mandate that I have. Okay,
but now within the Gauteng legislature that you are now in the executive of, will you support investigations into malfeasance?
Of course, if there's a vote of that nature.
But you're not going to bring it. You're just going to sit there and say, well, listen, nobody stole the millies, therefore I've got nothing to say.
Mike, that's just not how it works. So the reality is that, and it doesn't work like that at national level either. So I can assure you, the National Minister of Agriculture is not going to be walking himself to Parliament to go and complain about the Minister of Home Affairs. It just doesn't work like that. So it is the role of the legislature to play that role. You actually have an opportunity as members of the legislature to pose questions to the executives. We now account to the legislature as members of the executive, and that's what I am willing to do and able to do fully. And as I'm saying, within the mandate that I have within my department, absolutely I will take a hard stance on matters of malfeasance, corruption, whatever it may be. And remember, over and above that, there's a party that is Rise Mzansi, which has its own party mandate outside of the fact that we are also in government. And so we are able to comment on issues. We have our leader, as I said, who is heading up Scopa. We have others who are in parliament. We are able to raise issues.
So does this not raise the suspicion more about the fact that the 3 other party positions given in the Gauteng legislature are nowhere near the allegations of malfeasance?
Let me ask a question in a different way. In the Western Cape, you have the DA, which is in majority in the executive, as well as in the legislature. Do they not raise malfeasance? Or do they don't raise any issues ever?
I don't know. I don't live there, but I presume things will get raised. Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm saying it's very easy when you hold all those levers of power just to close ranks, as we've seen with Papita Diakaran, a woman lying dead. Her daughter's an orphan because she uncovered malfeasance.
And by the way, I think there's been, even during our campaign, we raised a lot of issues around the management and corruption issues within the health department. I myself was very vocal on those issues. And I'm saying what we need to accept now is that there are different roles that we play. We're no longer in an election campaign, number one. Similarly, when you are an opposition party, you have a very specific role to play. When you are in the executive, you have a very specific role to play. When you are in the legislature, you have a very specific role to play. That's how our government is designed. So for me, it's about saying, how do we ensure that we manage to retain our principles whilst also delivering on the actual roles that we've been given? So one of the things, for example, that I'm very clear about is that we now have an opportunity to actually be a voice for the people in the room. So I'm able, for example, to go to the legislature and to table the issues that I've been told by people and say, these are the things that people are concerned about. How do we collectively address that? It's a very different, it's a different way of engaging and driving change, but it's possible.
But is that only within your portfolio? So in other words, you can't raise the point of the militia driving around in BMW.
It's not limited. It's not limited to my portfolio, and that's fair enough. So we have the ability as members of the executive to actually raise matters in the legislature and say, in my constituency engagements or in my public meetings, such and such matters were raised. Let's deliberate upon them as members of the provincial legislature. So there are mechanisms with which to raise matters, but all I'm saying is that one must also accept that the role that I have now has its own particular mandate, which I'm very excited to fulfill fully. And fortunately, we also have other members of the party who sit at other levels of government and are able to play that role. And so we have a healthy level of coordination, but also separation, because it's important that they should be able to also do their work at a national level and also, doing the work of holding executives accountable. And I think we are able to then balance, the different needs of our different constituencies on that basis.
Vuyiswa, looking forward now, you guys have contested your first election. It's been a lot of work to get to this point. I know, and I've seen from the work that we've done here, that starting a political party is not just filling in a form and then putting your name on a ballot. There's a lot of work, and there's a lot of work that Rise Mzansi did. You've got to start to that role of sellotape of politics. Where to from here for Rise Mzansi? What is your growth strategy?
So I think we're actually already on that path. And a big part of that, obviously, is about how we grow towards 2026 and build a track record of governance and build a name for ourselves. When we contested this last election, as I said, we were a virtual unknown. We now actually have data. We understand where our votes come from, where our, who our voters are to some extent. And that gives us an ability to have a much more targeted approach towards how we contest elections. So I think it's going to be a good launch pad. But furthermore, as I said, we'll now have an ability to build a track record. So our focus is really on 2026 and how we now, structure ourselves accordingly for local elections. And I've always said this here, I think you can remember that for us, it was never just about this election. This election was a foot through the door for a longer term goal, which was actually 2029. And the beginning of 2029 is, local elections. I think local elections is really the heart and soul of how we deliver change for South African people, because that is where most people feel governance and feel the effectiveness of government in a very tangible way. We can talk all the policies and all the kind of high-level GNU things. Quite frankly, the day before the GNU and after the GNU, I was still waking up on the left side of the bed. I still had the same amount of electricity. These are the things that matter to people. And so that for us is really where the true test of our political proposition is going to be. And so it's really about building for that now.
And I want to close off by asking you a question, and that is, what question should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Sure. I don't know, Mike. You're quite thorough, I must say. And I always find these sessions quite rigorous. So,
but there's got to be something. It's got to be something that I should have asked you and I didn't. Even if it's a low, softball question.
A softball question.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. I haven't been asked that.
Well, we'll do that. We'll do that the next time.
Yeah, I'll think about that.
You think about it. Vuyiswa, thank you so much for coming through. Ladies and gentlemen, we are represented by quality people like Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, who's prepared to come here, listen to these questions, which are not always comfortable, not always easy. And I can promise you, to anybody that watched my interview with Solium Samanga, I'm not going to give anybody a pass on this. I think what's happened in Gauteng, personally, is disgraceful to all concerned. And I'll keep on the story. And we'll ask everybody from every party the same questions. So, that's just the State of the Nation way. I hope you enjoyed it. And Vuyiswa, thank you so much. We wish you everything of the best in your portfolio. Really, you've got our support. Thank you for coming on again.
Thank you, Mike.
To everybody that joined us, go rent a car at Pace Car Rental and like and subscribe the State of the Nation. We'll see you again soon.